Hey, fourth grade, I'm going to try something a little bit different. We're going to continue reading 39 Clues. Let me know what you like better. I could either read it aloud to you and just look at the book and record my face, or I can let you follow along with the book as I'm reading it on my Kindle app. So let's head to the Kindle app. And we are on chapter 4. So Dan felt a dizzy rush like the time he ate 20 packs of Skittles. He couldn't believe how much money they'd just thrown away. Ever since he was little, he dreamed about doing something that would make his parents proud. He knew they were dead, of course. He barely remembered them. Still, he thought if he could just accomplish something amazing, even cooler than making the ultimate baseball card collection or becoming a ninja lord, his parents would somehow know, and they'd be proud. This competition to become the greatest Cahill sounded like the perfect chance. Plus, he liked treasure, and it was a real bonus that Aunt Beatrice's face turned completely purple as he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Now the great hall was empty except for the 7 teams and Mr. McIntyre, sorry guys. After a tense silence, the old lawyer said, "You may open your envelopes." Rip, rip, rip. The clue was written in black calligraphy on the cream paper. It read, "Resolution, the fine print to guess, seek out Richard S." "That's it?" Mary Todd Holt screeched. "That's all we get?" 10 words, Eisenhower Holt muttered. "That's," he started counting on his fingers. "Roughly $500,000 per word," Alistaros supplied. "Since your family gave up $5 million, I got a bargain. Each word only cost me $100,000. "That's stupid," Madison Holt said. "We need more clues." "Richard S.," Ian mused. "Now who could that be?" He looked at his sister and they both smiled like they were sharing a private joke. Dan wanted to kick them. "Wait a minute," Jonah Wizard's dad scowled. "Did everyone get the same clue? Because my son's contract insists on exclusive material. It's in his standard contract." "The 39 clues," Mr. McIntyre said, "are the major stepping stones to the final goal. They are the same for each team. The first one, which you have received, is the only one that will be so simple." "Simple?" Alistair O. raised his eyebrows. "I hate to see the difficult ones." "However," Mr. McIntyre continued, "there are many paths to each clue. Hints and secrets have been buried for you to find. Clues to the clues, if you will." "I'm getting a headache," Sinead Starling said. "How you proceed is entirely up to you," Mr. McIntyre said. "But remember, you all seek the same end, and only one team will succeed. Speed is of the essence." Irna Spassky folded her clue, stuck it in her purse, and walked out the door. Alistair O. frowned. It seemed Cousin Erna has an idea. The Starling triplets put their heads together. Then, as if they had gotten a collective brain flash, they stood up so fast they knocked over their chairs and ran outside. Jonah Wizard's dad pulled him into the corner. They had a heated discussion, and his dad typed some stuff into his BlackBerry. "Got a jet," Jonah said. "Later, losers," and off they went. That made 3 teams already out the door, and Dan still had no idea what the clue meant. "Well," Ian Cabra stretched lazily like he had all the time in the world. "Are you ready, dear sister?" "To make fools of our American cousins," Natalie smiled. "Any time." Dan tried to trip them as they walked past, but they nimbly stepped over his leg and kept going. "All right," Mr. Holt announced. "Team, form up." The Holt clan shot to their feet. Their buff little pit bull, Arnold, barked and leaped around them like he was trying to bite their noses. "Where are we going, Dad?" Hamilton asked. "I don't know, but everyone else is leaving. Follow them." They marched double time out of the great hall, which only left Amy, Dan, Alistair O., and William McIntyre. "Dear me," Alistair sighed. With his black suit and silk cravat, he reminded Dan of a butler with a secret. His eyes seemed to be smiling, even when he wasn't. So I want to make sure I said that word correctly. It's like a bow tie. So see how I used Google to find out what that meant? A short, wide strip of fabric worn by men around the neck and tucked into an open neck shirt.
Cravat.
"I think I'll have a stroll around the grounds and think about this." Dan was thankful to see him. Alistar seemed like the nicest of their competition, but he was still competition. Dan stared at the clue again, more frustrated than ever. Resolution, fine print, Richard S. I don't get it. I can offer you no help with the clue, Mr. McIntyre managed a faint smile, but your grandmother would be pleased you accepted the challenge. Amy shook her head. We don't stand a chance, do we? The Cabras and the Starlings are rich. Jonah Wizard's famous. The Holts are like steroid monsters. Alistar and Irna seem so, I don't know, worldly. And Dan and I have other talents, Mr. McIntyre finished, as I'm sure you'll find out. Dan reread the clue. He thought about baseball cards and letters and autographs. We're supposed to find this guy Richard, he decided. But why is his last name just S? Amy's eyes widened. Wait a minute. I remember reading that back in the 1700s, people used to do that. They would only use one letter if they wanted to disguise their names. Huh, Dan said. So like I could say A has a face like a baboon butt, and you wouldn't know who I'm talking about. Amy boxed him on the ear. Ow! Children, Mr. McIntyre interrupted. You will have enough enemies without fighting each other. Besides, he checked his gold pocket watch, we don't have much time, and there's something I must tell you. Something your grandmother wanted you to know. An inside tip? Dan asked hopefully. A warning, young Master Dan. You see, all Cahills, if they know themselves to be Cahills, belong to one of the 4 major branches. Amy stood straight. I remember this. Grace told me. Dan frowned. When did she tell you that? In the library one afternoon we were talking. She didn't tell me. Maybe you weren't listening. There are 4 branches. The Ekaterina, the Janus, the Tomas, and the Lucian. Which are we? Dan asked. I don't know. Amy looked up at Mr. McIntyre. She just mentioned the names. She wouldn't tell me what we are. I'm afraid I can't help you there, Mr. McIntyre said, but Dan could tell from his tone that he was keeping something back. However, children, there is another interested party you should know about. Not one of the 4 Cahill branches, but a group that may make your quest more difficult. Ninjas? Dan asked excitedly. Nothing quite that safe, Mr. McIntyre said. I can tell you very little about them. I confess I know only the name and the few unsettling stories, but you must be aware of them. This was your grandmother's last warning, which she made me promise to tell you if you accepted the challenge. A chill went down Dan's back. He wasn't sure why. The name Madrigals sounded evil. But Mr. McIntyre, who? My boy, the old man said, I can tell you no more. I've stretched the rule of the competition, saying as much as I have. Just promise me you will trust no one, please, for your own safety. But we don't even know where to start, Amy protested. Everyone else just rushed off like they knew what to do. We need answers. Mr. McIntyre stood. He closed his leather folder. I must get back to my office, but dear, perhaps your way of finding out is not the same as the other teams. What do you normally do when you need answers? I read a book, Amy gasped. The library, Grace's library. She raced out of the great hall. Usually Dan did not run with excitement when his sister suggested visiting a library. This time, he did. The library was next to Grace's bedroom, a big sunken parlor lined with bookshelves. Dan thought it was creepy being back here with just Amy, especially since Grace had died next door in her big 4-poster bed. He expected the rooms to be draped all in black with sheets over the furniture like you saw in movies. But the library was bright and airy and cheerful, just like it had always been. That didn't seem right to Dan. With Grace gone, the mansion should be dark and dreary, kind of like the way he felt. He stared at the leather chair by the window and remembered one time he had been sitting there, playing with a cool stone dagger he busted out of a locked display case. Grace had come up so quietly he didn't notice her, till she was standing right over him. Instead of getting mad, she knelt next to him. That dagger is from Tenochtitlan, she said. Aztec warriors used to carry these for ritual sacrifice. They would cut off the parts of their enemies that they believed held their fighting spirit. She showed him how sharp their blade was. Then she left him alone. She hadn't told him to be careful. She hadn't gotten angry because he busted into her cabinet. She even acted like his curiosity was totally normal, even admirable. No adult had ever understood Dan that well. Thinking about it now, Dan felt like somebody had cut away part of his spirit. Amy started searching the library books. Dan tried to help, but he had no idea what he was looking for and quickly became bored. He spun the old globe with brown seas and weird colored continents, wondering if it would make a good bowling ball. Then he noticed something he'd never seen before under the Pacific Ocean, a signature. Grace Cahill, 1964. Why did Grace autograph the world? He asked. Amy glanced over. She was a cartographer, a map maker, and an explorer. She made the globe herself. How did you know that? Amy rolled her eyes. Because I listened to her stories. Huh. That idea had never occurred to Dan, so where'd she explore? A man's voice said, everywhere. Alistar O was leaning on his cane in the doorway, smiling at them. Your grandmother explored every continent, Dan. By the time she was 25, she could speak 6 languages fluently, held a spear or a boomerang or a rifle with equal skill, and navigate almost every major city in the world. She knew my hometown of Seoul better than I did. Then, for reasons unknown, she came back to Massachusetts to settle down. A woman of mystery, that was Grace. Dan wanted to hear more about Grace's boomerang skills. That sounded sweet. But Amy stepped away from the bookcase. Her face was bright red. Alistar, what do you want? Oh, don't let me stop you. I won't interfere. But there's nothing here, Amy mumbled. I was hoping for, I don't know, something I hadn't seen before, but I've read most of these. There aren't really that many books, and there's nothing about Richard S. My dear children, may I suggest something? We need an alliance. Dan was immediately suspicious. Why would you want an alliance with a couple of kids? The old man chuckled. You have intelligence and youth and a fresh way of looking at things. I, on the other hand, have resources and age. I may not be one of the most famous Cahills, but I did change the world in my own small way. You know my fortune comes from inventions, right? Did you know I invented the microwavable burrito? Wow, Dan said, earth-shattering. There's no need to thank me. The point is, I have resources at my disposal, and you can't travel around the world on your own, you know. You'll need an adult chaperone. Around the world? Dan hadn't even thought about that. They hadn't even been allowed to go on a 4th grade field trip to New York last spring because he put Mentos in his Spanish teacher's Diet Coke. The idea that this clue hunt may take him anywhere in the world made him feel a little lightheaded. But we can't help each other, Amy said. Each team is separate. Alistar spread his hands. We both can't win, but this challenge takes weeks, perhaps months. Until the end, surely we can collaborate. We are family, after all. So give us some help, Dan decided. There's nothing here about Richard S. Where do we look? Alistar tapped his cane on the floor. Grace was a very secretive woman, but she loved books. She loved them very much. And you're right, Amy. It does seem strange that there are only a few of them here. You think she had more books? Amy cupped her hand over her mouth. A secret library? Alistar shrugged. It's a large house. We could split up and search. But then Dan noticed something. One of the random little details that often caught his eye. On the wall, at the very top of the bookshelf, was a plaster crest just like above the front door of the mansion. A fancy C surrounded by 4 smaller coats of arms. A dragon, a bear, a wolf, and a pair of snakes wrapped around a sword. He must have seen it a million times before, but he never noticed that the smaller crests had a letter carved in the middle. E-T-J-L. Get me my ladder, he said. Get me a ladder, he said. What? Alistar asked. Never mind, Dan decided. He began to climb the shelf, knocking down books and knickknacks. Dan, get down, Amy protested. You're going to fall and break your arm again. Dan had reached the crest, and he saw what to do. The letters were smudged darker than the rest of the stone, like they had been touched many times. Amy, he called down again. What were those 4 branches again? Ekaterina, she called. Tomas, Janos, Lucian. Ekaterina, Dan repeated as he pressed the E. Tomas, Lucian, Janus. As he pressed the last letter, the whole shelf swung upward. Dan had to jump away to avoid getting squished into a book sandwich. Where the bookshelf had been was a dark stairwell leading down. Secret passage, said Uncle Alistar. Dan, I'm impressed. Might be dangerous, Amy said. You're right, Dan agreed. Ladies first. We shall continue more at a later time. I hope you guys have a great rest of your night.